And I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of background about myself and why I started doing these events. My passion is human performance. I've been studying human performance ever since I was about 16 years old. I think I read my first human performance book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Anybody here read that book?
Yeah, I did. Best book ever.
Yeah, best book ever. I think I read that book when I was maybe 17 years old. And my experience lies in leadership and sales. I've worked with very large organizations like BlackRock and iShares, Canadian Tire, CIBC. There's some of you in the room today. And I would train the sales leaders. I'd work with the organization team, and I would teach and train them communication skills and leadership skills and how to identify skill gaps in their team and how to close the gap and how to communicate vision and get their people engaged with the vision. And then I would work with the sales team specifically and teach them communication skills and sales processes like that. So you'll find that my approach to the conversation is very coach-like. I ask a lot of questions and I tend to listen at a very deep level. So in 2015, September of 2015, I got very sick. I was pretty badly burnt out. I had a very hard time walking, and I had really bad stomach pain. And I had to reflect on my life and look at the way I was living my life and ask myself some very important questions. I was 39 years old. I was about to hit 40. It was 1 year from 40. It was actually pretty much my birthday for 39. And this sense of urgency started to creep in. Like, am I living the life I want to be living? And am I saying the things that I want to be saying? And am I doing the work that I want to be doing? And is the work I'm doing, is it affecting me in some way and it's making me sick? Because every doctor I spoke to said, Sophie, you're out of alignment. And I didn't really understand what out of alignment meant. You know, my food was out of balance and my workouts were out of balance and my energy was out of balance and I just worked a whole lot more than I had fun. So I was out of alignment. And what I learned is when someone is out of alignment, it creates dis-ease in the body. And so I had dis-ease in my body. And I started to do some research because I thought maybe the work I'm doing is contributing to my sickness. And in my research, I started to notice these conversations for women's movements and women's empowerment and gender diversity and gender equality and inclusivity. To be very honest with you, I had worked my whole life in my little silo. I wasn't really looking left and I really wasn't looking right. I didn't know what was going on with other women. I didn't really understand there was a conversation for gender equality happening along the sideline while I was just moving forward and plowing ahead. And I started to see and I started to feel a desire to learn more. In my burnout, I will tell you, I had zero vision for the work that I wanted to do next, which is unlike an ambitious young woman like myself. It felt very awkward not to have vision or desire to do something, you know? When you're an ambitious person, you have desire. So I started to do this research, and like I said, I started to understand that there was a conversation about gender inequality, and I started to go out and I started to do conferences and events and like that. And then I had an interest to do an event myself. I wanted to do something different than what I had experienced. What I was seeing was a lot of women in the room and not a lot of men, and a lot of women talking about how we could get forward, and not a lot of mention about how we could get forward in collaboration and partnership with the men. So I had an event, and we had Miss Michelle Wharton on the panel, Miss Michelle Brown on the panel, and Lena Gurgis on the panel. I had somebody representing the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and the 30s, and we basically just spoke about what it was like to feel like a woman in a man's world. And that was a fantastic, spectacular event. It was more successful than I had expected. And then I started to notice something happening with the conversation with the people in the audience, because it was an interactive conversation. And what I know about human performance is that it's really easy to put blame on anything other than ourselves for why we're not performing. And I started to hear the women casting a little bit of blame on the men as to why they weren't as successful or didn't have as much opportunity. And I want to be very clear, I'm not saying that it hasn't been challenging for women, and I'm not saying that we haven't experienced whatever we experienced. What I'm saying is I wonder if in the 2017 business world, if it's actually the conscious fact that women have it more difficult than men, or is it the way that we think that has it be more difficult than men? Because when I think of one of the most successful women on the planet, I think of Oprah Winfrey. And I think of her age and the time frame that she grew up in, and I think of the amount of money that she's amassed, and the amount of influence that she's amassed, and the amount of expertise that she's amassed. And when I think of her background, I don't feel like she had any more advantages than anyone else, and yet she was still able to perform at the level that she performed at. So it makes me start to wonder, is it really that we're disadvantaged and we have less opportunity, or is it the way we think? And so I thought, let's put some men on the panel and let's hear from the men. So we had some men on the panel, and Shep was on the panel, and my husband was on the panel, and we had a great panel. And just to give you some insight as to what was said, there was a couple of really great points. One point was, if you're on a team that's not giving you the opportunity that you want, you have a choice. Get off that team. And another thought was, the old thinking is going to get out of the system soon because it's retiring. So hold on and wait. And it was very interesting, these two different experts had these two different opinions. And I continued to do some research, and I started to learn some other things about women. I'm not sure, how many of you know that women are positioned to inherit 75% of the world's wealth in the next 10 years? 75% of the world's wealth is approximately, I saw a stat, $900 billion. It's going to be the largest transfer of wealth in history. And so I started to wonder if this transfer of wealth is happening, what kind of human being, let's take the gender out of it, what kind of human being is going to be receiving this money? Is it going to be somebody who is in an empowered, conscious thought operating in 2017 or 2020 or 2026 when it happens? Or is it going to be a human being that has old programming in their system? Old programming, which we all have in our system, I'm sure, from our mothers and our grandmothers and our fathers and our forefathers before us. It's like, what's the narrative that's been transcended down from generation to generation? And so I thought, how better off are we going to be if we have people inheriting money that think the same way that men do? And I started to think, we have this thing, behind every strong man is a strong woman. Like, I make that interpretation as though women have an influence over the strong man. Is that a good influence? Like, is that a good interpretation or not a good interpretation? Would you agree with that or no? How many of you agree? Just let me, agree, right? So I started to just think, if behind every strong man is a strong woman, and so us women want to take acknowledgement for our influence over the men, and yet in the same token we say the world is all fucked up and it's run by men, what do us women have over ownership of that? So I just started to have these kinds of conversations with myself, and I was like, I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to start thinking a little differently as human beings, not just women. And so in my research, I continued to hear we don't have enough talented women in the pool, the candidate pool to choose from. So I thought back to my own life, and I thought, what could have ever stopped me? And so, to put myself through university, I was a stripper. I took my clothes off for money to pay my way through university. Thank you. And I probably lied to a lot of you in the room about how my husband and I met, but that's how we met. And I don't know which of you I told the truth to, so I'm sorry. But I started to think, if I felt that much shame, I was pretty brave, to be honest with you, but I still had a lot of shame around it, and I felt really scared that somebody would find out. And what I was mostly scared about is that I wouldn't get a job. So I had all these corporate gigs, and I didn't actually say anything about it. I don't know if I really lied about it because nobody asked me if I was a stripper. So I didn't really have to say no. But I thought, what have other women, and not just women, I'm going to concentrate and focus the conversation on women, but I want the people in the room to take this as a broader context. What has other people done in their life that they're so afraid of and so scared that somebody's going to find out that it stops them from stepping into their leadership? And so I started to think, maybe my burnout happened for a reason, an opportunity for me to step back and really reflect on what I can make, what kind of contribution I could really make. And now I'm in a position in life where I'm very fortunate, and I don't have fear that something's going to be taken away from me. So I thought, if I could share the skeleton in my closet, my naked skeleton in my closet, then maybe I could inspire another woman and human being to look at what it is that's holding them back, to let it go so that they could step up and lead.
Who else is going to have the balls to join you?
And so, thank you, Marcus, when I thought about who was going to join me, I didn't think about who was going to have the balls. I thought of it from a very logical perspective. I thought, what do I know about human performance? What I know about human beings is that when we're in a particular position of training and developing ourselves, we're like rubber bands. So you learn a bunch of information, or you gain a new experience, and then you shrink back to your default way of being. And so what do I want to do? I want to stretch you so far out of your comfort zone so that when you shrink back a little bit more open than when you got here. And so I thought, what and who do I know who's experienced the most shame in life? And I thought, I don't think, to be honest with you, there's more shame than a gay man trying to come out. And I thought, who do I know that I could ask that conversation with? That was my assumption and interpretation. If I'm offending anybody, it's not my intention, it's just the way I was thinking. And so I asked Marcus to join me on the panel. And then I thought, who else do I know? And I thought of my friend Kat, my very dear friend Kat, and I thought, she's in a world and an industry that receives, I think, and I could be wrong, some of the most stereotypes and stigmas. And I don't know, I'm gonna leave it at that, stereotypes and stigmas. And I'm sure she must have experienced some form of judgment with the work that she does, and some sort of shame. And yet, the thing about her that I find more interesting than anything else is that she's the most empowered woman I know. And I thought, what do I hear all the time? Women need more confidence. The men in the room will raise their hand if they got one skill on a job description. But the woman on the room will keep her hand down if she has 5 skills on a job description. So we need more confidence. So I thought, if we could harness how this woman be so empowered in the face of the shame and the stereotype that she experiences, and perhaps we could impart that on other women. And so the purpose of today is to help you break through and identify the old programming that's going on in your head. So stereotypes, stigmas that you've heard from your fathers and your mothers from generations before you that don't necessarily serve you in 2017 in your conscious moment. It's also to help you let go of judging yourself and others, and it's also to help you evolve as a leader, and it's also to help you have more joy and freedom in your life. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please welcome Kat and Marcus. So a few logistics. I just want you to know that I do honestly want the bar to be closed for any alcoholic drinks at this particular point in time. If you're thirsty for water, no problem, please go ahead. The washrooms are in the far back to the right when you're walking that way. If you're going to use the washroom, could you please go on the outside, because we have a camera in the back there, so just walk on the outside like that. This part of the evening is going to take an hour at most. I'm going to have an interactive conversation with Kat and Marcus, and then we're going to open it up for your questions. So I'm going to ask that you hold your questions off for maybe 20 minutes or so, like that. If you're really popping, let me know, and then I'll engage you in the conversation. And then I'm going to close up, and then I'm going to invite you to mingle and continue and deepen the conversation, have some more drinks, and then some more food. So what I'd like to start with is that I'd like to start with asking each one of you to think of that very one thing that causes you shame and causes you fear. What is it that you are so afraid of that somebody else may find out? And if they did find out, it could cripple you in your life, to the point where it stops you from stepping up and offering the world your unique contribution as a leader. Because we need more leaders. So I want you to think about, what's that one thing that's stopping you from being a leader right now? And I want you to think, what would it be like for you if that wasn't there? If you didn't have that fear? What would life be like for you? And what is it you would do tomorrow? Or maybe you would be so excited you'd pick up the phone and you would do it right now. I want you to walk out and be ready to do that.